Hey, Will.
Hey, John.
Will, are you okay? You look sweaty and confused.
Yeah, sorry about that, John. It's no big deal. I'm just endlessly upset and unable to find any delight on this sorry blue orb we call planet Earth.
I'm sorry to hear that, Will. What's got you so bothered anyway?
Well, here's the thing. I was on cinemaholics.com, my favorite website of all time, of course, since you know that's where I can find all the latest episodes of the Cinemaholic podcast, plus bonus content like written reviews, rankings, even videos. You know the deal. Who doesn't? Best part of my day is reading what's new on the happiest website on Earth. But, well, I ran into some trouble today that I just can't get over.
Trouble? Will, if you want, we can certainly go right to the police.
No, John, it's too late for that. You see, I was on the website and I was trying to find the podcast episode where one or both of us talked about The Souvenir directed by Joanna Hogue, but I couldn't remember when the movie came out, what else we talked about that week, or anything important like that. I couldn't do nothing.
Gosh, Will, that does sound like a nightmare, but I've got some incredible news.
You do? So we're finally getting Anna Faris as a guest on the show?
No, not that incredible, but close. There's already a way for you to find anything you're looking for on cinemaholics.com. You just use the search bar.
Search bar? Slow down, John. I can't keep up with your Bill Gates lingo. Where can I find your Tesla space travel NASA search bar?
Easy, Will. You just scroll to the top of the page and click on the magnifying glass search icon on the right side of the screen. Then you can put in any movie or actor you can think of to find the podcast episode or any other Cinemaholics content that mentions it.
I'm doing that right now. This is incredible. I just found out that there are 2 times we talked about The Souvenir, starring Honor Swinton Byrne on the Cinemaholics podcast, and I even see a yearly rankings list with a souvenir on it right now. Wow, it's right there. This is the best day of my entire sorry life.
Mine too, buddy. Now let's search for the most important Cinemaholics episode of all time.
Whoa, John, you're scaring me. What kind of episode could that possibly be?
Oh, you'll find out. Anna, you can come in right now.
Anna Faris? John, you didn't.
You're right, I didn't. Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, where we talk about the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm John Agroni, film editor for The Young Folks. From Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he's a pop culture writer for Cinema Blend, and he's going to join you for the holidays. It's Will Ashton.
Hello.
You can find more episodes of our show, including our full archive on cinemaholics.com. If you'd like to hit us up, cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com is our email of choice. Again, cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. And we also have a Patreon that you can check out as well if you'd like to support the show, patreon.com/cinemaholics. We also have Cinemaholics merch, and this is the part where I should mention that Cinemaholics has a new design, and part of that new design is that comments are back on the site. We had to take comments off because we were having spam problems. Will Ashton accidentally sold Cinemaholics to the Russian government again. And so we figured it out, though. Will and I, we went to Moscow, and well, you can watch No Time to Die if you want to know how that turned out. But yeah, now Cinemaholics looks fresh and new. And I sent the new website to Will pretty recently, and Will, you said you hated it? It's your least favorite?
No, I thought it was good. I was just, it was a busy weekend for me, unfortunately, but no, I liked it, and I hope the listeners like it too.
You can't fake that kind of enthusiasm, ladies and gentlemen. So yeah, definitely check that out when you get a chance. Now, part of the big deal for this week, I think in any week, for us has been there are too many movies. Like, there are so many movies coming out, we can't watch everything. It's been kind of impossible. So on this week's show, we are going to talk about Eternals because it's the big Marvel thing, you know. Sure. Can't avoid that. So we'll talk about Eternals. We're going to have time for Spencer, of course, and we are going to talk about a little smaller movie that some of you might not have heard of called The Beta Test, and we wanted to squeeze that in here because we're not here to just talk about the big stuff, right? Beginning of the show, we say the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, Chloé Zhao, before Eternals, was just a small indie filmmaker, and then, you know, she made Nomadland, and now she made... what was that?
Look at her now. I mean, she had The Writer, and people were like, The Writer, that's pretty good. I watched that on a plane. I enjoyed it on the plane. I was like, wow.
I gotta watch it still. I've heard it's very good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not bad. And you can see how this director would you can see why Eternals has like a whole scene dedicated to the writer, basically. We were one of the characters of this. But anyway, so we're going to talk about that movie, but there are a few other films that we didn't get to that we're not going to get to here. The first one I want to mention is The Harder They Fall, which is, people were talking about this movie. It's a Netflix movie with Idris Elba. No, and yeah, he's a cowboy. And no, it's not that other one where he was, what was that movie we talked about earlier this year where he was like a concrete cowboy?
Yes, Concrete Cowboy. Yeah, I mean, I remember, it was called Concrete Cowboy. I remember when I saw, because I saw it at TIFF, I saw like the little snapshot from it. I was like, oh, cool. It's a traditional Western with Idris Elba. And then obviously the film wasn't exactly that. So when I saw this was actually what I thought Concrete Cowboy was, I got very excited. And I started watching it. It's quite good from what I've seen, but I've only seen a little bit of it. But I'm going to be talking about that with Corey Woodruff, and you can hear that bonus episode sometime this week, hopefully.
Yeah, I won't be able to make it. So for me, and I wanted to see Harder They Fall, but so much stuff is going on because we also have Wheel of Time coming out next week, and I've been busy watching that. I'm seeing Encanto today, and it's just like, everything's coming out right now, and we still have so many releases coming out the rest of November. We have a bunch of stuff coming out in December. It's going to be a really busy time, so we'll do our best. If there's anything we miss that we don't even mention on the show and you're curious about it, please help us out, of course. Leave a comment on the main show, or send us the email. Do what you got to do. But we will be talking about Harder They Fall, or we'll be talking about that one in a bonus show. I even realized too that I didn't talk about last week. I think I mentioned that I was going to be watching the new Souvenir, the Souvenir Part 2. And so I did watch that, but we're not going to be doing a big thing about it. And I think because, Will, you haven't seen it yet, and I don't know when you're going to be able to catch it. And I don't even think you need to rush to see it. I mean, it would be great if you could see it in theaters, but I don't know when that's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, it may not even be playing in Pittsburgh, unfortunately. It might. I'm actually waiting to find out today if we're playing it at the theater where I work, the Harris Theater. So, if we get it, it wouldn't be until around Thanksgiving. So, unfortunately, that's the earliest I'm looking at to see it, and it could even be later than that, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, I really liked the first Souvenir. I guess maybe not really liked. I liked it a good bit. I was excited to see a second one, and I've heard the new one is even better. So I'm definitely gonna try to see it if I can in theaters. But if not, I'll see it sometime on demand or something like that.
Sure. It's not a typical sequel, and I do think it's one that if you have an opportunity to see it in theaters, Will, since I know you love the theatrical experience, it's one of those for sure. And yeah, we'll see. Hopefully you'll get that opportunity here soon, but that's why we won't be talking about the Souvenir Part 2 anytime in the super near future. That said, I do have a review of it out on my YouTube channel and on theyoungfolks.com. So if you want to know what I thought about it, I haven't talked about it here on the podcast. I'm just going to hold off for now, but I really liked it. And I had some hesitations with the movie that I get into more with my review. But I think that some people, if you know who you are, if you're a really hardcore fan of a certain type of indie movie, this is one you don't want to miss. Now, there is one more movie I wanted to mention here, and we'll be ending the show talking about what's coming up next week. I think we have big stuff coming up next week. One of those movies is Finch, and Finch we thought we would be able to squeeze it into this episode, but again, there's just too much. I was able to see it just barely. Will, I think you didn't have quite enough time, but we're thinking we got time. This thing just dropped on Apple TV Plus, right? Yeah. I lightly recommend it. I don't think it's amazing, but I think it's a little bit of a nice gem. It's very derivative, but it's derivative in a good way. If you're going to be derivative of Silent Running and WALL-E. Sure. I'm good with that, especially if you have Tom Hanks with you.
Well, I saw the opening of it, the cold opening, and it had kind of a I Am Legend vibe too, I'm guessing. That's one of the films you're referring to.
Not too badly. Yeah, I was thinking it was going to be more I Am Legend in the very beginning, and then it's an RV movie in the post-apocalypse with a robot and Tom Hanks and a lovely dog. It's basically a Fallout movie without all the crazy Fallout stuff. It's good.
What's not to like from that description?
Yeah, so we'll be talking about Finch more next week, hopefully, and so that gives you listeners some time to check it out if you're interested as well. It's on Apple TV Plus, and I don't know if I mentioned yet, Harder They Fall was Netflix, so super clear about that. Lots of stuff coming our way, but we don't have any more time. We're out of time already because we just got to get right into this big review. It's the big Marvel movie. We can't avoid it. Let's talk about Eternals.
5 years ago, Thanos erased half of the population of the universe. But the people of this planet brought everyone back with a snap of a finger. The sudden return of the population provided the necessary energy for the emergence to begin.
How long do we have?
7 days.
We're Eternals. We came here 7,000 years ago to protect humans from the deviants.
Why didn't you guys help fight Thanos? Or any war, all the other terrible things throughout history?
We were instructed not to interfere in any human conflicts unless deviants are involved.
By who?
So Eternals is the 26th Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. As I say that, I can hear Will Ashton's eyes like falling into the back of his skull, right? Because just this idea that we've seen 26 of these.
I feel like I'm pretty numb to the whole Marvel thing at this point. Like, you know, I've gone through like so many phases with how I feel about them. I mean, obviously, I'm not the biggest Marvel fan. I've, you know, aired my grievances with how they make movies and stuff before, but I mean, yeah, this one I was at least curious about, because as we mentioned at the top of the show, Chloé Zhao directed it. It seemed like Marvel wanted to kind of push back against their formula in some ways I find interesting. I still find interesting. But also, I mean, like, to their credit, they're not just kind of doing the same thing over again with this film, but at the same time, they kind of are. So it's yeah.
Yeah, it's always, I think it's kind of fun on a film curiosity level to sort of look at what Marvel is doing just from a machine level perspective of like what their plans are, what are their blueprints. Like I get a little bit of joy from that. It's even removed from the movies. It's like nerdy trivia stuff. Yeah, it's not for everybody.
It's just so clinical, I feel like. It just feels like you're like, okay, now we gotta make sure we gotta release this date, and you know we gotta make sure we do this thing, and this happens.
Becoming more and more like the comic book realm, which I think is a caution reality for some people, I would assume. But anyway, yeah, Eternals. It's so funny to me. Two big things about this movie. One, I think, is the obvious. Like, this is a big move by the MCU to sort of, they want to do another Guardians of the Galaxy, like reset what you think of with these movies, how cosmic and grandiose they can be. It's setting up a ton of stuff. Yeah.
Was that the intent? To make this Guardians of the Galaxy?
Well, no, not in terms of tone, but if you recall with Guardians of the Galaxy, that movie comes out in 2014, so several years after Iron Man.
Yes.
And we had only gotten like hints of like a big cosmic universe outside of, like we had gotten it in Thor to some extent, like very small. And then we got the hints, right, of Avengers, of like, there's this Thanos character, there's this like big alien race. Yes. Guardians was like the entry point into, okay, here's like a laid back intro into like how the rest of the universe outside of Earth works, right?
Right. No, I got
success.
You. Yeah.
Eternals is trying to do the same thing with like, we'll talk about it, but like Celestials and like just big brain stuff that they want to do. And that's what I was getting at earlier with this is like me being kind of like a comic booky, like, oh, how are they going to do this? Like what's going to come here and there? And yeah, it all is very pedantic. The other thing with this movie is that this was supposed to come out last year. So this was supposed to come out before Shang-Chi, right after Black Widow. We were going to get Black Widow in like, what was it, like April or May of last year. And then
May, yeah.
And then we were going to get Eternals in November. So it was always going to be like, I think November. I think it was always going to be like a fall release, right?
But not only that, like they had awards hopes for this.
That's what I was about to say. Right, they wanted this to be like, okay, we're going to put this out maybe in Venice, or maybe, I don't think they would have kind of tell you right, but you know what I mean? Like they wanted this to be like what Dune is right now.
This was, like this is like their prestige film in a way that like, I think, technically, at this point, they only have had one genuinely prestige film, and that was the first Black Panther film.
Yes.
So they were kind of trying to do that half-heartedly with Avengers Endgame as well, and kind of like, well, you know, you gave Return of the King 13 nominations. Maybe you can throw a bone to us. But obviously the Academy didn't care about that.
Yeah, the Academy was like, sure, you can, your Avengers 5.
Right.
No thanks.
But like, this is like legit, like they were campaigning to get Oscar nominations for this film. Not solely, obviously, that wasn't the only intent of the film, but they were thinking because, you know, obviously they got Chloé Zhao. They obviously, you know, had her involved with the project before she won Best Director and Best Picture with
for
Nomadland,
which is insane to think because she was going to have Eternals and Nomadland coming out at around the same time, which is wild to me. I mean, it's almost kind of fitting for Marvel. Like, I think it worked out for them in the long run.
Sure,
because
and for
Eternals and for her, because she gets her Nomadland push last year, and then Eternals comes out this year. I mean, it writes itself, the narrative. You know what I mean?
Do you think this would have been a Norbit kind of situation where if Eternals had come out the same year as Nomadland, people would be like, I don't know, maybe we should give Best Picture something else?
Possibly so. Like, it would have sucked some of the energy and the sort of she can do no wrong part of, because you got to remember the awards crowd is so fickle to what you're saying, right? It's
they're very reactionary, I guess is what you're trying to say.
We're already seeing with Eternals, because Eternals is getting negative criticism. And, you know, for me, like I was pretty negative on the movie initially and still am. A lot of people like it, but a lot of people don't as well. And I think there is already this sort of, is Chloé Zhao really a good director? Which is ridiculous because, I mean, she just made a Marvel movie. I mean, like, you know, you could criticize this, but I think that her work on Nomadland is totally removed from the result of this movie.
I mean, I'm still a big fan of Nomadland. Funny enough, I just realized I'm still wearing my Nomadland shirt. They gave me one during the award season. Well, no, I mean, I've been homebound today, but yesterday I thought it'd be funny because, like, obviously it'd be like people wearing like whatever Thor or whatever shirts. I thought it'd be funny if I just walked in with like a Nomad shirt, being like Nomadland, and this audience, and the only person that recognized it or even acknowledged it was the ticket guy at the box office, just like, oh yeah, Nomadland. I heard that was pretty good. I was like, yep, it won Best Picture.
It's pretty good. You heard right.
But no, I mean, I really like Nomadland. I guess it's uncool to say that at this point. I don't know. I don't know. I remember, like, it happens with every award season. I feel like whatever, with the exception of like Parasite and a few others, where it's just like whatever movie wins Best Picture is automatically not cool anymore because it's like it won the big prize, so it's like there's prestige to it or something. I don't know, but I mean, I've only seen it one time, and I saw it back at Virtual TIFF, but I really did like that film, and I think, you know, however you feel about this film, or however I feel about this film, I don't think that takes away from what she did with Nomadland.
Totally agree. Well, let's actually talk about the movie. We've been dancing around the details, and I think part of that is because there's a lot of exposition in Eternals. So, like, even just like explaining it kind of tires me a little bit, and I'll do my best here. But...
yeah, because even like when the movie started, it just was like, all right. Yeah. So in the beginning,
it did kind of have like a Genesis 1:1 kind of vibe. Which is interesting, I think, in terms of like, this is very different, right? For Marvel, they're kind of doing like, they've done space. Now they're kind of doing like, okay, here's like the history of everything. Like they're trying to do like, you know, in the Bible, you know, they're trying to like do religion stuff here too. It's big ambitions. This whole movie is. So Eternals, the whole setup is that there are these superpowered beings called Eternals. Like, it's a whole crew of them. They're basically like Power Rangers mixed with like Captain Planet. They are super old, like thousands, if not thousands of years old, maybe even older than that. We don't know.
You're telling me these Eternals are really old?
Yeah, right? Isn't that ridiculous? But they were sent to the planet Earth in 5000 BC. So like right at the dawn of like when civilization was kicking off. Like, I don't think at 5000 BC, like we had things like the written word yet or anything like that. So we're still, you know, long off, but that's like Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. So the Eternals are sent to Earth by Celestials, and the Celestials, if you remember from other Marvel films, they're basically like gods, like the gods of the Marvel universe. They're these all powerful beings. I think the big celestial character we've run into was Ego, the Living Planet from Guardians of the Galaxy 2, even though he was kind of like a rogue celestial. He kind of like was an accidental celestial, so he's not fully like the same sort of deal. I don't think he's as powerful or supposed to be as powerful as the other ones, and we've seen other celestials kind of pop up here and there, but not in a major way. Now the celestials send these Eternals to different planets to fight these creatures called deviants that are very kind of boring. They kind of remind me of like the Hulk dogs, like the Hulk 2003 dogs, where they're like these like fleshy predators that are just trying to like kill everything, like because they just are. And the Eternals have to go to these planets to destroy them so that civilization can prosper. So that's like been their job. Their one focus over thousands of years is like they came to Earth, they defeated all these deviants, and they've just been kind of like waiting around in case the deviants come back. They're not allowed to do anything else. And the movie like makes a point to bring that up. Like I was just watching the trailer for the first time, and you can really tell that they, like the writers of this movie, there are a few. Chloé Zhao has a co-writing screenplay credit. We also have Patrick Brule, Ryan and Firpo, and Kaz Firpo. But you can tell
she has 2 writing credits on this, which I don't know how that works from a WGA standpoint, but she
the different drafts probably.
Whatever.
I would say that they clearly like were in the writers' rooms like, everyone's going to complain of like, why didn't the Eternals help out? When Thanos was doing his thing, where were they when Ultron was doing this thing? If they were around during World War II, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? Because they have superpowers, right? And so this movie is saying, well, they're not allowed, which is kind of ridiculous because like they still do stuff. Like we get flashbacks in this movie where they are kind of interfering. And I guess this movie is trying to say it's like they try not to interfere because they make things worse, I guess is the point. I don't know.
Yeah. But, well, that reminded me of like, you ever like try to like explain something really complicated? And I'm not saying this specifically just as an example, like explain something really complicated to children. And they're just like, why does that happen? It's like, well, stuff like this, like, well, why didn't they help out when Thanos happens? Like, oh, they can't. Why can't they? Oh, because like they're not allowed to. Why aren't they allowed to? Because like they would interfere with humanity and cause. Well, why can't they help with other things? Look, I don't know, kid. Like, just they couldn't.
I just hear like Chloé Zhao like just saying that. Right. It's like I just imagine her with like Richard Madden, and he's the one who was asking.
Because if they did, things get complicated. Well, isn't things already? I don't know. Like, they just don't worry about it.
Just don't worry about it. Yeah. Now these Eternals are very interesting on their own. Like it's an interesting cast. They're like a diverse group, right? And so like the idea is that they are diverse because they're supposed to sort of blend in sort of like with humanity, I think is the point. One of them is like a young kid, for example. And I think that's like been one of the weirder criticisms against this movie. Like one of the criticisms I don't get is that like, oh, this is a diversity checklist. And I'm like, well, I don't know, because it kind of matches the story to have like people of different races part of your like Earth ambassador team, right? Like I don't know. I think people are saying like, oh, it's forced that they have like a black character, they have a deaf character, they have a Chinese character. Like I'm like, okay, but I mean, they're most of them are white. Like also, right. I don't know, you're just trying to make your cast interesting, and like you have an opportunity to cast different people who are good for the job. So to me, force would be you get like you drill it in our heads over and over again. But I don't think this movie does that.
I mean, like there's this whole idea of like kind of like bringing the band back together, and they're like traveling the world and stuff. Wouldn't it make sense just to have them like all be different ethnicities and backgrounds and stuff?
Yeah, I feel it's like more interesting that way. Like why is it such a problem? Like, you have an Indian, or I think he's Pakistani. It's like you have him in the role. I'm like, well, yeah, that's fun. You get to have like a whole Bollywood part of the movie, and it's like, what's wrong with that? I don't know. People are weird.
I mean, the Bollywood stuff was probably my favorite thing, honestly. Like that was like when I kind of perked up. I was like, oh, this is fun again. And then like,
and it was funny. I was like, oh. I love the idea of like, somebody's kind of like making movies about the. I think he was making stuff about the Avengers too, or there are like little hints about like he's kind of like almost like they look down on the Avengers, and I think rightfully so. Like they're kind of above it all, and like that kind of energy I found interesting. I was like, oh,
sure.
Like, why not? Have a little fun with the MCU in that way. Punch down at it.
Have fun. Oh man, I don't know if there's time for that, John, and Eternals. I don't think we can't budget in fun for this one.
So sorry. So the movie takes place in the present day. The deviants have come back, as you can imagine. There's this big emergence event that's going to happen where basically something really bad is. I don't think we should get into the details because people might find it spoilery, but something really bad is going to happen to end the world, and the Eternals kind of have to interfere once again. And you already mentioned they have to get the gang back together. I was surprised that the main character here is actually Gemma Chan. Now, Gemma Chan, we saw her in Captain Marvel and the 2019 movie. She was like kind of a side antagonist in that movie. And we get to see her in this one, and she's like the main character. She plays a character named Cersei. She thought she had one of the most interesting like powers, I thought, where she can like change matter into something else. It's like, man, I can't wait to see that used in so many different creative ways. Yikes. Because that didn't happen. But she's sometimes here and there.
She turned a bus into sand. That was kind of cool.
I think it was like rose petals or something.
Oh, wow. Whatever.
I saw this movie longer ago than you did. Well, you already forgot. That's telling us something. But she's kind of like the heart of the team, right? She's very empathetic. She probably cares about the humans, overall more than anybody on the team. And she's like a museum curator, and she's kind of like the main character. And it's like, hey, this is kind of cool. Like she's a different kind of main character. She's kind of like a sensitive but clear-headed kind of protagonist, and she's like the leader. She's kind of like the de facto leader because the person who's considered the strongest among them is Icarus, played by Richard Madden. And he's kind of on the outs with the team because he just kind of pieced out 100 years ago. No one's heard from him. He's super powerful. He's like Superman. He can like fly around, shoot laser beams and all that stuff. And he had a big old romance with Gemma Chan. And that's right, Marvel had a sex scene.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, they had one in Iron Man 1. I guess some people forget that.
But different, though. It's like they kind of just like...
This is actual, they're doing the hanky-panky in this as opposed to the night out or the morning after. Because
I think in the Iron Man 1, too, it's just sort of like crashing against... He like roll on the bed for a second and fall off. It's kind of just like... It's the first part of it, but like this is like full on, like something's happening, like covered the kid's eyes.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that's the thing about this movie is that like they are actually responding to criticism. So you can't get mad at like they're actually addressing things that people have brought up, which is that, these Marvel movies have largely been pretty sexless. I mean, we were making fun of that in Shang-Chi as like, having these movies be, fairly celibate with their characters and stuff like that has been... I don't know if it's been like a major issue, but something that's very noticeable and kind of distracting after 20-something films with, like these clearly adult characters and whatnot. So, yeah, I mean, it's brought up in this film, but at the same time, I think a sex scene would be better if the two characters had chemistry. Yeah,
if they clearly liked each other. Like if they enjoyed being around each other in any sort of way. Because when we meet Cersei in the present day, she's not with Icarus anymore. She's with this guy, I forget his name, Dane something, played by Kit Harington.
Yeah.
And he works in the museum with her.
Was that a spoiler? Because my audience didn't know that he was going to be in it, and I didn't know if that was announced pre-hand, but...
he's in the trailer, so...
Is he? Okay, sure.
And he's part of the marketing. I knew Kit Harington. I never even watched the trailer. I knew Kit Harington was in this.
Okay, I must have forgotten. I don't know. Like my audience, I guess, they were surprised to see him in the film.
Really? Well, I mean, hey, not everybody's in the know. I guess. I mean, if you're listening to Cinemaholics, I feel like you're probably kind of you're going to get a few details. I mean, he shows up in the very beginning of the film. If this was like a character who shows up at the very end, I probably wouldn't mention it.
Do you think they brought him on because they're like, give me that dark-haired, handsome guy from Game of Thrones, and they brought him instead of Richard Madden? Like, no. Well, if you're both here,
yeah. And there's some interesting stuff that happens with his character that alludes to other things they could do in other movies, but he's not a big presence in this movie. So he shows up in the beginning, and he's not really around that much. This is more of like Richard Madden is like, to your point, is like who they kind of kept around for more of the film. But yeah, we also have Kumail Nanjiani in this, his Marvel debut. I thought he was really fun. We have Brian Tyree Henry, but he doesn't show up till later. Barry Keoghan, he also doesn't do much till later in the film. Don Lee's in this. And then Angelina Jolie in a supporting role, like she's not the main Eternal. Because that's what I was expecting. I was expecting her to be the sort of like what Gemma Chan is, right? Mm-hmm. But no, she's kind of like the older, wiser, battle-hardened character supporting, and interesting career direction for her. Same with Salma Hayek.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like Angelina Jolie isn't really super interested in being a movie star at this point. Clearly, she's been directing more. She's been focusing her efforts on producing a lot recently. So, I mean, when she was announced to be in the Marvel franchise, as with this movie, it was kind of like, oh, wow, like, it's kind of, that's a big commitment, considering that she doesn't really act much. And then when you see the films, it's like, oh, okay, so she's kind of playing more of a mentor figure to, kind of boost up the movie's profile and stuff, which, I mean, makes sense. But it is a bit odd to see like a genuine movie star like Angelina Jolie around, and she just kind of like, doesn't really do much.
Yeah, I mean, she has like a character. She's one of the few Eternals that has like a full character arc in this movie. A lot of them don't. And part of that, I guess, is because some of these characters are fresh faces, right? So we have Lauren Ridloff, who plays an Eternal who's like super fast. She's barely in the movie, though. I was kind of disappointed that she didn't show up more because, like, hey, I'm a deaf person. I like the idea of seeing a deaf superhero.
Yeah,
so
I mean, I thought she was, pretty genuinely charismatic too, and in a way that I was bummed that her character wasn't a bigger part of the film, because I was interested about her character. I was, obviously progressive to have her in the film, but yeah, it just kind of seemed like there wasn't really much to her character besides her disability, which felt like a big shame.
I definitely like there were hints at things about her that were interesting. This idea that she's been stealing artifacts from all over the world and like collecting them. I was like, oh, that's fun. And also,
she can read fast. She runs fast. She's she's fast.
She's Belfast. But I guess the main thing for me with her is that the Gemma Chan and Richard Madden's characters, no chemistry whatsoever, but they try, right? Like they're on screen and they're supposed to be this like burning, well, they won't, they could, they should, they. But then Barry Keoghan and Lauren Ridloff are together for 2.5 seconds. And I can't, like, the chemistry is like echoing, like people in the audience are just like, oh my gosh, love is in the air. People start hugging and kissing each other watching these two on screen.
Yeah, there's just a little bit more of a genuine spark between them. Even, like with the short span of time we see with Brian Tyree Henry and his love interest, there's not like a flame between them, but there's at least a little bit something you can kind of understand it. Yeah.
There's like real like emotion and like I've loved you for the longest time between Brian Tyree Henry, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say he's the first gay superhero in the MCU. One of the first on-screen blockbuster gay superheroes ever. They're not a lot.
Probably.
And big so, move. Yeah. Marvel saying like, yeah, okay, we hear you. Like you wanted the Joe Russo thing wasn't enough for you in Avengers Endgame. Well, all right, here you go.
Yeah. They get smooch and all that, and which is they
get a big old
nice
smooch.
Yeah,
I was high five in the air. I was like, all right, we're moving on to exciting things. Leah McHugh is another fresh face here. She's one of the only ones that like, okay, I haven't seen her in anything before, right? Or I don't think I have. If I have, I've just forgotten her. But she gets like a bit of a story arc here, but it's like one of the worst ones because it just revolves around who she likes. And the most interesting thing about her is that like she's been a kid for thousands of years and she can't age. And she's just constantly being like, why is this? Like, why did they do this to me? Like, why do I have to look like this? Like, why, And that's so interesting. But then this is like indicative of the whole film. They take this interesting question and then the answer to it is like, well, really what she wants is a boyfriend. And it's like, that is such a unsatisfying like thing. Like I get like part of the movie is about like, there is like a romantic element to it. And so I kind of get that. But I guess like she is kind of a microcosm of all my complaints with this movie. Like her, and I also think that Gemma Chan is so reactionary as a main character. Like most of this movie, she's interesting in the very beginning when it's just her and Sprite and, she has her, museum job. She's kind of running, like she's kind of interesting there. But then as this movie gets buried in other characters, she's just like a blank slate. Like she's no personality, no sort of like, I'm not emotionally hooked into this character and what she wants. They really just ride everything on which boy she's going to choose. You know what I mean? And it's so uninteresting to me. And this movie was very uninteresting to me. I think it's very dull. But what do you think of Eternals?
I am unfortunately not too far from where you are at this point. I mean, if my jokes and kind of dismissive attitude towards the film hasn't already been heard already, I mean, I think it's not coming from a place where I was writing this movie off initially. I know a lot of people online were kind of already coming into this movie with knives because, like we said before, Marvel was acting like this is like, oh, this isn't like your usual Marvel movie. Like this is legit. Like this is awards.
This isn't your nephew. This
stuff.
isn't your nephew's Marvel.
Yeah.
This is your
Right.
grandpappy's.
Which, I mean, I don't know. Like we said, like I was willing to give it the benefit of the doubt, not only because Chloé Zhao was involved, but like clearly they were willing to do things with this movie that they have been avoiding or just outright ignoring with previous Marvel and MCU movies. And like, you know, like we said, like there's open sexuality, there's complex questions, there's this kind of deeper thoughtfulness to it. There's like actual scenes shot on locations. It's, I believe, at least partially shot on film too. Like there's like clear effort to put this, make it more cinematic, like kind of make it less of like your kind of like run of the mill Marvel movie effort. So I am already going to come into this with a little bit more interest in, say, you know, whatever is going to be coming up next. You know, Spider-Man or whatever. Like I'm more intrigued inherently with what is going to be happening with this film. But unfortunately, like you said, like I was going in with the criticisms in mind, but knowing that like, you know, maybe like people aren't really willing to meet this movie at its level. But unfortunately, I just think it's not very well made. Like it's not well paced. Each scene, like you said, is kind of devoid of like inherent tension or conflict, and like there's this kind of flatness to how things look. Even like a lot of the scenes are underlit because I think Chloé Zhao was trying to do kind of more naturalistic filming with this, and in a way that I think would be interesting. But unfortunately, I think the Marvel style just kind of underplayed that to the point where some scenes are kind of hard to see. Like a lot of the fight scenes are kind of given like this kind of like gray and black exterior that's not very visually dynamic, especially for a film like this that is slow pace and also just, you know, 3 hours long basically with trailers. And so, yeah, I mean, it just, the sad thing is just, it's not very interesting and it's just not very well made, which is a shame because like you said, like on paper, I think this is wildly way more interesting than your average Marvel movie. Even some of the ways it makes some like very bold and I would say wrong-headed choices at times as far as like some characters and like decisions they make, you know, certainly, you know, I imagine we're going to have to talk about the Hiroshima thing at some point, which is just such a baffling decision. But like even in execution scenes like that just have like no real flair or interest to them. It just seems like even having like a high pedigree cast, it seems like they're all just kind of shrugging their shoulders with their goofy outfits, just kind of being like, I don't really know what we're doing with this one. Like I'm just kind of hope it turns out well because all these other movies seem okay. So I guess like breaking it down, it seems a little bit more interesting than something like Shang-Chi or like Black Widow, because it has more inherently wrong and interesting ways. But watching it, unfortunately, it's just a slog.
Yeah, it's weird because like I really don't hate this or anything. Like while I was watching it, I didn't find myself extremely bored. I just sort of like after I got out of it, I had this feeling of like, what was the point? Like I feel like I sat through such a long movie, I didn't really get anything from it. I felt a little bit like it was riding me along and it was giving me just enough to keep me interested so that I didn't fully check out. But I guess like by the end of it, I was like, there were so many things I feel like they just sort of bungled that they didn't need to bungle, because you know, I agree with most of what you're saying here. I think it's impressive in what it's trying to do. And the result though is lots of monologues, lots of complicated lore, and just overall, like everything's like a mess. Like I feel like the lore and the mythology are one movie, and then the emotion and the character development are in a totally different movie, and the two just don't go together. Like part of like what brings all this stuff together, it should be seamless, it should be connected. While the action scenes are happening, even though I thought the action scenes were kind of dully lit and everything, I should really care about what's happening. I should really care when it looks like a character might die or does die. But this movie suffers from the fact that it has so many characters and it has such a big franchise connection that I can't really believe any death is real or permanent, especially when they reveal something that I won't reveal, that makes me think, okay, they could just have this actor come back if they really wanted to. So what are the stakes? And then it asks these big philosophical questions of like, should they do this? If they do this, this could happen. And I'm like, wow, that's an interesting question. That's actually like a genuinely confounding, like ethical dilemma. And then the movie's answer to it is nowhere near as interesting as the question. It just falls flat. It's like, well, we're just going to do this thing that feels like it was just ripped right from the comic book without any real thought or consideration to the rest of the movie. And it's just stuff like that that's more glaring when, even if it happens in other Marvel movies, at least with those movies like Shang-Chi, you have such an exciting, energetic, and quickly paced movie that you can more easily forgive stuff like this. So in this movie, that's harder to do.
Yeah, I mean, with this movie in particular, like when you bring up like Guardians of the Galaxy, I think that's as close as we've gotten to like a happy marriage of like a filmmaker and the Marvel style that we've come by. And then also I'd say Black Panther too.
Well, and he helped develop a lot of that, right? I think James Gunn, one of the...
Sure.
I would say because he has a lot of continuity with Marvel movies at this point, because this was before the Russos came in.
Sure.
And Marvel was still kind of all over the place, we tend to forget. They had made a couple of stinkers around that time. They had made Thor: The Dark World. They had made Iron Man 2. They had made The Incredible Hulk. It wasn't like Marvel had it all figured out when Gunn was showing up.
Sure. But I mean, I think it's fair to say that Kevin Feige is like the author of the MCU, especially as we know it now. And yeah, like it seems like oftentimes we're like, well, why is this movie, like we have like, you know, all these talented filmmakers that usually come in to make these movies, but they feel so distinctless because more often than not, it seems like Kevin Feige kind of hires lower end, like, you know, low budget filmmakers and gets them under his wing to kind of have the clout of like artistic credibility. But then he just kind of like, you know, has second unit teams do the action scenes and like, you know, he's kind of runs the show while also like kind of letting them do like different things with actors or whatever. But this is like the rare time, so far as I can see, where he actually kind of let Chloé Zhao, like, you know, have more of a creative say in this, which is what he should be doing, I think, you know, letting filmmakers have more of an impression on their films, letting them do their things. But in this film, it feels like it backfired because, you know, frankly, Chloé Zhao, she's only done, what, like 3 films now at this point, maybe 4? And most of them are fairly low budget. I don't think anything outside of like Nomadland was more than like $5 million at this point. And, you know, just kind of throwing her into it with this film is just like, it's so overwhelming, even for like an experienced filmmaker with, you know, however many blockbusters under their belt. But it seems like for her, she seems like constantly overwhelmed, like trying to figure out like, all right, so we're doing this, like, well, why are we doing this? Okay, I have to go back and explain. So this is why this is happening. It's like, and then like, that's why I think the pacing suffers. I think that's why the story suffers. I think that's why the character suffers. Just like, it just seems like a movie that's so overwhelmed with itself because like, you know, it is Marvel like taking a risk, being like, okay, we've gained enough clout. We've made almost 30 movies at this point. We can, you know, kind of experiment a little bit, maybe do something with more artistic credibility and, you know, actually really make another awards contender like we did with Black Panther. But yeah, it seems like even though they are doing the right things with this movie, it seems like the execution just falls flat because they just they couldn't quite find that balance, unfortunately. And it's a shame because I think they're going to take the wrong lessons from this and not try to do things like this when they should.
I'm so worried about that.
It just, yeah. I mean, I mean, who knows? Maybe they will just be like, okay, we kind of goofed on that one, but like we were on to something there. But I'm worried that they're going to be like, okay, fine, we're not going to shoot on real locations. We're not going to do more to like diversify and expand the mythos and all that stuff when they should. They just kind of need to, like, you know, I think Kevin Feige just needs to kind of have a little bit more creative influence, but not take away from the artistic intent of his filmmakers. It's a balance that's come about, I think, 1 or 2 times, especially like I said with Black Panther and with Guardians of the Galaxy. But otherwise, it seems like he just doesn't really let filmmakers do that thing. But when he does, unfortunately, it backfires with this one.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be specific with Captain Marvel is one of the big ones where you have Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck, who are these indie directors about the same level of like budgets that they were used to as Chloé Zhao. They didn't have quite the same critical acclaim as Zhao or like recent momentum that she did. But yeah, you look at Captain Marvel and you don't like what about that movie like screams Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck. Clearly they were borrowing more from Black Panther here with Ryan Coogler because you watch Black Panther, that is a Ryan Coogler movie. Like he very much is in that. But even that movie suffers a bit from, you know, even he has said that like action's not his thing. So they kind of did the action from like with a totally different team, right?
Yeah, second unit. Yeah, which, I mean, I felt it was more jarring with this film because there were so many times where like, okay, this is Chloé Zhao clearly directing, and here's the second unit team getting involved and all that. Like, there's like a whole like scene with like a CG cave thing, and I just checked out because it was like, okay, this is just the second unit kind of doing a CG, nonsense thing for a bit, and I can just emotionally check out because nothing's really happening here. So I feel like that's not really the intent of the film. I feel like I'm supposed to be allowed to check out for like 15 minutes in your like 3-hour movie before like the action kind of kicks back again in like the last 25 minutes. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's what you're supposed to get out of a 3-hour epic like this. Yeah,
it's so long, and yet it's still very rushed because they rush through a lot of these really important character moments where there are just some Eternals we barely spend time with, and we need more time with to sort of understand. They go to so many locations, they go to so many places. There are also a lot of flashbacks in this movie. I mean, it is impressive what they were able to pull off in a 2-hour and 40-minute film or whatever it is, because like how many sets, how many costumes, like there's just such a lot to do. And so a lot of people have said, and I had this exact same thought because Disney Plus is on the mind and the recent success of WandaVision and Loki is on the mind. But a lot of people are looking at this like, why didn't you just do a Disney Plus series? Because then you could have like, here's the episode where we meet Kumail Nanjiani and you get a whole episode of his character, and you have like the flashbacks. You could do like the sort of Lost thing. And so then when you get to the big climax of the season, then you not only do you have more time, but you are way more invested, right? Because you've had hours and hours with these characters, but it hasn't felt like you've had to sit through it all at once. And it is weird psychologically how our brains work. But people are saying like, well, yeah, miniseries would have worked. And hey, maybe it would have, because again, Loki and WandaVision have been very successful. I mean, Falcon and Winter Soldier, I think they were smart to do that as a series, because if that had been a movie, that probably would have been not have gone over super well, right? But I don't know, because box office is still so important. And this movie had a good opening weekend. A lot of people like me are thinking it's going to be very front loaded. It didn't make as much as Shang-Chi, but it's making enough to like justify like it's not going to be like a major disaster or anything for the studio, depending on how the next few weeks sort out. And it's looking good for them because they don't have a ton of competition. It's award season, and I mean the next big thing that's going to compete with them is their own movie, Encanto, right? So. And Ghostbusters Afterlife, which I could actually see that being a big movie, but because I think last I saw it, Ghostbusters is tracking super well. But that said, Eternals, they can't pass up an opportunity to make a ton of money with the box office, because that's where the money really is. Their subscriber growth has really slowed down, and I don't think making an Eternal show based on characters people don't know, and something of like, I got to watch like 10 episodes of a show with characters I don't know in order to be caught up on a bunch of big movies that are going to happen. I think that would have been a bad bet. So I can see why Feige and them were like, no, let's just do the movie. Let's do the prestige movie that can win awards. And you know what? It didn't work for me and you and a bunch of other people. But some people really love this. And I am sort of baffled by it. Like what people are really liking about it. I don't really, I've read some reviews. I've tried to like see, okay, why did you like this? Like, what was it about it? Like, what am I missing? Or like, what, have you been able to get any sense of that? I know you've seen the film more recently and you haven't really had time, I assume, to like really get into it, but I mean, do you have any theories?
Well, I mean, I think there's always going to be, when you have like a movie like this where people have expectations about it and it kind of goes somewhat in a different way, I think there's always going to be inherently someone who's just like, oh, no, you don't understand. This is misunderstood. This is secretly great. You know what I mean? Like there's so many movies where, especially in the superhero genre, people are just like, those simple-minded fools. They're not understanding the brilliance here that's really going on. I don't know. I mean, I think there's...
Oh, and there's also, real quick, there are also expectations at play, right? So like a lot of critics, like we saw this before most of the reviews were out, right? So I didn't know how it was going to be. But then now you have people who are watching it like fanboys, right? And you have people who think it's going to be terrible and they're watching it. It's not that bad. So maybe they're being a little bit more enthusiastic to help make up for that perceived, like people are being too hard on this, which I understand.
Yeah. I mean, I can understand walking out of this hearing it's like, oh, it's the lowest rated Marvel movie. Oh, it's like a real black mark for the MCU, and seeing and be like, it's not great, but it's like, it's fine. I still think it's very messy and incoherent, but it's not my least favorite Marvel movie. Like I would probably be willing to give this one another spin before I rewatch like Thor: The Dark World or Black Widow or something. But Just because I think there's a little bit more at play here. It is obviously ambitious in a way that other Marvel movies can somewhat settle. But yeah, I mean, I just think, they've cleared a bunch of benchmarks. I think Feige isn't a dumb guy. Like, he clearly, paces out pretty well as far as like what the MCU is, but there's still some hurdles I think he's trying to get over. One of which is being, kind of seen as equal to some of his cinematic counterparts. Like, there is the stigma with the Marvel movies that they're just kind of like, like with the whole Martin Scorsese thing and all that, where it's just like, oh, like they're theme park rides. They're not real movies and all this stuff. And I think he may not show it, but I think that is starting to eat at Kevin Feige. He's just like, no, I'll show him. I'm going to make a real movie. Like, this is a real movie. And, it is a risk.
I could see him whispering that to Chloé Zhao by the camera. And she's like, okay, Kevin. Okay. It's like, we're going to show him, aren't we? And she's like, yeah, sure. And she's like looking at her notepad of like other movies she can't wait to make.
But I mean, like, I don't know, like, I generally don't know, like, what happened behind the scenes. But like I said, it feels like he gave Chloé Zhao a little bit more creative freedom than, like, some of his other, up-and-coming filmmakers that he's put under his wing. So I do wonder if he's kind of like, like, if this had turned out well, he could be like, oh, well, thank Chloé Zhao. She's the one that pulled it off and all that. And he could, have more of that credibility and kind of be like, I just spotted the talent. I kind of shepherd the way and all that. And I mean, also, I guess he could have lied if that was not the case. But I mean, it sounds like he wants, to kind of like be able to have more of a standing, I guess, critically, or at least with like film circles, as far as like being, a real, a real great producer outside of just like being, financially wealthy and, making these hugely successful films. Like, having that kind of critical cloud is, I imagine, is probably eating at him at this point. And I'm, speculating, so who knows? Maybe he's like completely content in his life and he could care less. But and also, I imagine that's the case. Yeah.
And I also imagine, like, I think this was going to come out last year. Dune was supposed to come out last year too. So it was always going to be sort of matched up against that movie. And it does, like, I think Zhao was probably invoking a lot of Arrival, a lot of like Blade Runner 2049 in terms of how she wanted to kind of like blend her, blend sci-fi with her style.
She's said like her influences are Kubrick and Villeneuve and somebody else of like high stature like that.
And fittingly so. I think that she's, but all that said, I do think she still has a very distinctive style. But again, I think, though, we haven't really mentioned this, but I think it is worth saying that they also are dealing with a very unpopular property, a very unpopular IP. People don't know what the Eternals are. The Eternals were never niche. A big deal in the comics. I mean, niche, I guess, but like there aren't really like Eternals fans. I mean, this is something that Jack Kirby did in like the 70s and it never took off. They've tried plenty of times. And I do think this is like a scraping the bottom of the barrel kind of move where there's not that built-in fan base. And I think that there is this sort of, I think there's an excitement of that where like, we can do anything with this, right? Same thing with Guardians of the Galaxy.
I think that's, I mean, I think it's more like he's just kind of like, well, it's not like there's that many fans are going to get mad if we do something weird with this one.
Sure.
Like, why don't we just take a chance? And like, obviously like Marvel is a brand at this point, maybe one of the few like legit brands that like, there's a built-in audience that's guaranteed to go to theaters now. If there's a new Marvel movie, it's like, they can get weird with it and they should get weird with it. I encourage them to get weird with it. But yeah, I mean, I feel like they get weird with the story and they get weird with the characters, but just like tonally, like, I mean, I have very little experience with the Eternals comics, but from what I can tell, they're very colorful, very pulpy, very, very like weird and outlandish in a way that this movie seems to be allergic to for the most part. Like that Bollywood scene you're talking about, it's an anomaly in the film because it's just like, oh, there's color again. There's excitement. Like there's energy. Like where was this the rest of the movie and where'd it go? Like, it's just like, that should be like, the rest of the movie should be like fun and zippy like that. And it just seems like for the most part, either because there is still like that Marvel formula or like they just cannot kind of move past their like established style or whatever, that just seems like they can't really find that zaniness that would make this property, I think, a little bit more endearing than it is, because it's so self-serious that like even like the dumber stuff about this stands out more, because it's like you're asking me to take this so seriously, but they're like, these weird space god things that, I don't know, it just doesn't find its way, unfortunately.
It is working for some people, and I hope that I can have a conversation in the coming future with somebody who really digs this. I see this as being like, oh yeah, the Eternals is like my guilty pleasure. It's like, I know it's not everybody's favorite, but I really like it. And, I think there are some things in here to like, but clearly not our kind of movie. Now, that said, what about the Rotten Tomatoes score? Vilashan, have you seen the Rotten Tomatoes score for Eternals?
I've seen one of the scores because there have been so many articles about how this is the first Rotten MCU movie, I guess, officially.
It's been all over the place, to be fair. I've seen it climb and go down and then go down and down and down and then go back up. And then hey, who knows? So what was the last score you saw?
The last score I saw was, I believe, 52%.
All right. Where do you think it is now?
54%?
It actually went down from there, which I was surprised. 49%? I thought it might go up a little bit because I thought some of the late breaking critics might have come in, but I think this is one of those like, all right, now there's blood in the water. It's at 48%.
48%. I think the narrative is there at this point. Like this is considered a disappointment. And so, people aren't trying to like unless there's like the few where like they're just like, oh no, this is secretly awesome. Which I mean, like I was hoping to be that person. I was hoping to be like, you fools, don't you see what Chloé Zhao is doing here? But no, I
think Disney was purposeful though in terms of like who they got to watch this early, because it was in the 70s. In like the first week of like the embargo, and I saw like really positive reviews, and I was like, okay. I mean, not from like the SF area. Like I think SF critics, we were pretty united in not liking it very much. Like we were walking out of the theater and being like, the heck was that? But I think they purposely like they made sure that like some of the comic book sites checked this out, and they tend to be favorable. Like they weren't giving high ratings. Like I wasn't seeing like 5 out of 5, but I was seeing like, oh, it's not amazing, but yeah, like B-. Like I was seeing that.
Yeah. Well, I was seeing like, even from like those like folks who are just like, as soon as the Marvel logo goes up, this is a 10 out of 10 for me kind of folks. I'm exaggerating, obviously. But even they were just kind of like, well, it's dense. I gotta like, I gotta sleep
Perry
on
Nemiroff
it. Like they were like
acting, Perry Nemiroff got in trouble because she said it was dense, and people didn't know if she meant that it was dense, like stupid, or dense, like there's a lot in it. And she was just sort of like, no comment.
Okay, I wasn't referring to her exactly. There were like at least 4 tweets I saw that were like, it's so dense, and people were like, it's dense. Yeah, I wasn't trying to call her out or anything.
Oh, I know. She wasn't, she's not like that kind of. She's a like legit critic. She's very good. But anyway, that's 48% out of 300 reviews. But what about the audience score, Will? What do you think that is? 5,000 plus verified ratings because Marvel. It's a tough one. I wouldn't have guessed it.
Yeah, because that's the thing, right? Because like my audience seemed kind of split on it. Like they were like some folks were like clearly into it. Like it took a while, but they were like, all right, they're telling jokes. Okay, I can like this. All right.
Kingo,
but
I like him.
Yeah. Fall collection IKEA. Okay, good.
Phew. There's like they were sweating until that scene.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It just seems like I just feel like outside of like the diehards, I feel like most people are going to be kind of like whatever. Just like, I just saw Dune. That was better than this. Like we didn't even mention, like, I feel like if this had come out last year, it would have came out the same year as Old Guard. So it might even be worse. Like I didn't love Old Guard, but people clearly like that one more. And it's kind of a similar type film. So people would, I feel like, even be more like, just watch Old Guard. Why are we watching this?
I liked Old Guard much better than this.
I think they're both equally kind of dull, but I think I admire what Old Guard is going for more because it's shorter and it's smarter. But yeah, I think the audience is going to be slightly more favorable than critics, but still kind of on the lower end for Marvel. So I'm going to say 61%.
It's an 80%.
Well, you know what?
Surprising, right? I wouldn't have guessed
that. Good for Chloé Zhao.
Yeah, I would have guessed that. I would have guessed around what you guessed, but no. I mean, the audience is saying like, yeah, it's different, but it's got the stuff that I want, so I'm in. I'm good with it. So at least so far. Now the cinema score is a different story. I imagine you've heard about that. That's been all over the
cinema score. No, I actually have not.
I've seen a lot, I've seen a lot of people like chatting about the cinema score because it is a very interesting. What do you think it is?
People, you have one and only life in this world, unless you believe in reincarnation.
Why spend your time. Conversation at every Thanksgiving table.
you have one life, presumably. Don't spend it speculating on cinema scores. With that said,
wasting your time.
I think the cinema score is a C+.
No, it's a B. But
okay, why are people
B
talking about it?
Is the lowest for like an MCU film ever.
Okay.
It is very unusual. MCU films, I think the lowest, they're almost always like A plus, sometimes
Sure.
A minus, rarely
just,
B plus. They're never like B. Yeah.
I'm just laughing because I'm just imagining like the cinema score audience is like so dejected after walking out of the movie. It's like, I don't know what happened. I guess I got to give it a B.
Well, I think I don't know if that's how they determine it. I don't know exactly how cinema score works. I mean, I've read about it, but I forget, because I think they base it a lot on like, would you recommend it and stuff like that. But anyway, that's Eternals. It is a very long movie, and I feel like everybody who really wanted to see it already did, and I think word of mouth is going to hurt it quite a bit in the next week or two. It's made $161 million worldwide, $200 million budget. I think this could lose money. I don't think it's going to be a major flop, but I don't know. I think it does have the issue where some countries aren't playing it because of the inclusion of a gay character, right? So, and they can't just like edit that out as easily as they have in their other movies.
And they shouldn't edit it out, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm glad they kept it in, for sure. It is showing, because Disney has been kind of skittish about like having like gay characters, but in a way that they can edit around, like with Rise of Skywalker and Beauty and the Beast. So I'm glad they're not editing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, with this film, I guess the big question is, are we going to get Eternals 2? Which, clearly they're teeing up at the end of this movie, but like, it doesn't seem like anyone really is interested in it. Maybe some folks are.
I think they'll probably do like a Captain Marvel thing where Captain Marvel made a lot of money, but they're not just going to do like another solo movie with her. They're going to like bring in other characters and make a big event out of it. So it's going to be like Miss Marvel, and it's also going to be this character we've been building up in the streaming series. I think that's probably the right move. They're probably going to take some of the Eternals that people liked, you know what I mean? And be like, all right, your favorites are back, but we're going to like put them in this movie with, this new character that's really exciting. Maybe it's going to be played by someone from the post-credits scene that we won't reveal now, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So
maybe we have them hang out with like Guardians of the Galaxy. There's all kinds of stuff they can do to keep it interesting for people who want that sort of thing.
Maybe they can do a split deal with Xanax to get people to go.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry,
right, I think that's our cue to move on. We've been almost an hour on Eternals. I think you got the point from us on this one.
Man.
Let's talk about a movie that is different in every way, I would say. Let's talk about this movie, Spencer. Spencer is the latest film directed by Pablo Larraín. He did another film in 2019 that I didn't see. I think we talked about trying to catch it at one point. It was called Emma, EMA. And I didn't see it. Did you see Emma? Did you get to that one?
No. Did that come out last year or this year? I've seen it on like best of year list for both.
Yeah, it was a 2019 release, I think, or a festival release. And then I think, it got a little bit of buzz in 2020. People were starting to watch it then, and we talked about seeing it. Yeah, I didn't see it.
Yeah, I've heard it's quite good. I mean, I was thinking about this earlier. Like, I've only seen, I think, 2 other Pablo Larraín films before Spencer. I saw No with Gael Garcia Bernal, and then I saw Jackie, and I really like both of them. And I was just kind of like, I don't consider like Pablo Larraín to be like one of my favorite directors by. Sorry, Pablo Larraín. I apologize. But I think he has a pretty good track record, though it seems like that Apple TV Plus thing he did kind of came and went this year. So.
Oh, are you talking about Lacey's Story?
Yeah, the Stephen King adaptation. That
was one of those things that like people liked it, but it wasn't, it wasn't a buzzy release. But he directed all of that. And I think that's Stephen King, isn't it? I think that's a Stephen King adaptation.
Yeah,
so it should have more buzz in it. It should have had more buzz, but hey, what are you gonna do? I agree with you. I mean, I haven't seen No, but I have seen Jackie as well. And Jackie, I think, was a really good movie that not enough people I think, came out to watch and celebrate. Like, it had some like very early awards buzz, but then I think some people are saying Spencer is going to be similar in the sense that like it had a splash and then it just kind of like fizzled out as like other movies took the stage. I think that movie though, like people were looking at that in the same way with Spencer's, like the costumes, the production design, and then the actress, you know, at the center of it. Jackie was a movie that was about Jackie Kennedy, and it was like a sort of I heard one critic refer, I think it was Katie Walsh, be like he makes these doomed princess movies, right? And so Jackie was that, and then
well, I was gonna say, I mean, I was gonna get into this more in my review, but I feel like this is sort of like the inverse of Jackie, right? Because Jackie is a woman dealing with the aftermath of a tragic death, whereas like Spencer is like sort of like this like weird like inevitability of her death, and like kind of like her almost kind of coming to terms with the fact that her life is going to meet her end. So it's like almost like the mirror opposite of Jackie in that respect.
Sure. And Spencer is also a total anti-biopic, where they are purposefully not trying to do a true story. They're not trying to give you a packaged recap of a person's life.
Or a fable based on a true tragedy is what the title card says, right? Yeah.
Which is a great way to start the movie, because it does set your expectations there. So you can understand like, okay, a lot of this is going to be fictional, but the spirit of it is going to be like probably very interesting. It's not doing that thing like we've seen in like, what was it? The one that was last year with Renee Zellweger, that biopic, because wasn't that like Judy, yeah. Wasn't that movie kind of like just a moment of her life, but it was like they were back, maybe there were like flashbacks and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, there have been at least one or two other Princess Diana movies. I don't think we've gotten like a full like traditional biopic, but we had that one with Naomi Watts called Diana that came out, which was like kind of trying to do a similar thing. It was like the last 3 years of her life, I think. And focusing on an affair that she had. And yeah, I mean, I don't think we've actually ever gotten like a traditional Princess Diana biopic, but I feel like maybe more so than most other political figures or royal family figures, like her life has been so publicized and so speculated on, stuff that it's almost basically kind of common knowledge, even for us in the US.
And The Crown is already doing it. The Crown, and you know, their most recent season covered like the first, like I didn't see it, but I think it covers like the first few years, maybe the first decade of her marriage to Prince Charles and all that. This movie takes place in 1991, so it's been a decade since they got married, and the movie does rely a bit on you knowing about Princess Diana in order to sort of fill in the blanks. I mean, I think you could watch this without knowing all the details and still get the spirit of it across, but it definitely doesn't hurt, right, to have the context of what happens before and after this movie. In fact, I think some people have even said like, oh, I was confused because I didn't really realize, you know, that she wasn't really divorced with Charles yet, but they were separated, and some people were a little confused about that, I guess, but I felt like I was able to pick up on that, you know, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, Princess Diana, I mean, I was like very young when she died, so I don't have that much familiarity with her, but like I don't know that much. I know like kind of the general gist, like the thing, like some of the big pop culture moments, I guess, of her life, and then like I know about her death, but
it was the first like major death tragedy that I was aware of. Like media frenzy around it. It was on the news all the time. I don't remember like a death of a single person or some kind of like scandalous thing like that happening, because I was around like 7 years old, I think, when she died.
Yeah. I think I was 4 years old when it happened, so I don't really have any cognitive memories of it happening. I mean, I guess I was around, but I don't like, you know, I don't remember much about it, if anything.
You were hanging out.
Sure. I mean, you know, I was probably just thinking about kindergarten or something. So preschool.
You were in Belfast mode, you know, like
sure.
You're singing Everlasting Love.
Just a movie about me trying to process the death of Princess Diana as a kid or something.
That is what Pablo Larraín should have made.
That would be a very boring film. But yeah, that's all to say that my familiarity with Princess Diana was fairly limited, but I felt like I didn't have any questions or confusion about her life watching the film, at least.
Yeah, for me, I learned more about Diana later on. You know, like I remember hearing certain things. I had the understanding even as a kid that she was a highly publicized princess. In fact, I was even misinformed. Like I misunderstood her origin, and because I thought she was like, oh, she was like a teacher, she was like a commoner who married a prince, and that was not the case. She came from nobility, like close to the family, but she was the first princess who, like, she was the first one to marry into the family who had a paying job before her marriage. You know, she was a teacher adjunct, I think, and so that speaks to the narrative, right? There's this sort of like, oh, she's a princess of the people, even though she wasn't like nobility. It's kind of, I guess, similar to Meghan Markle, where, you know, she's technically a commoner, but she was like a major celebrity when she married Prince Harry, who is in this movie as not him, but as a young boy.
Right. Well, I mean, that is honestly, I think, what Pablo Larraín has said. Like his intent with the film was to focus on how a woman like that can be so normal in a life that is so abnormal. And like you said, I think there's obvious reasons for it. But even then, like, I think the fact that she had this kind of nobility and all that, but she was willing to openly and emotionally interact with like the common people. Obviously, like the whole where I think she like touched an AIDS patient was like a big deal for that. And like there's a lot of other things where she was like willing to like kind of like be with the people in a way that felt very revolutionary, I guess, like felt like something like that was almost unheard of for like the royal family that were just so like caged off and, you know, elusive in this way that obviously she wasn't. And, you know, with the tragedy added to it, gives her like this kind of weird balance of like mystique, but also there's like this like humanity to her life and legacy that, you know, I think makes it still very painful for a lot of people to reflect on.
You can really tell that pop culture had to really process Princess Diana's death through like movies and TV shows, because she died in the 1990s from a car accident in Paris. And I will always remember how like the Princess Diaries comes out a few years later. And to me, that always felt like a sort of reclamation of that princess, you know, who kind of comes from seemingly humble beginnings. And then I think the sequel to that movie was very much sort of like echoing the ideals of Princess Diana and what she meant to people, but kind of using film and using pop culture to sort of bring her back, almost to like sort of revive that message. Now with Spencer, this movie is doing something totally different from anything I've ever seen from a film or a show or anything tackling Princess Diana, because I like you said, I think Larraín does understand that people know the story inside and out. A lot of people are sick of people sort of capitalizing on how publicized her death was and capitalizing on that recognition of her name in order to pump out art to make money. There is that element. So I really, really love what Pablo Larraín is going for here. Like the fact that he's going for it at all, which is, as we said, it's a fable. It's a sort of like high concept, fictional, let's just make a movie that really just like hits on this moment in time. It's not about her death. It's about, you know, it's several years before, and it's her at like a pivotal moment of her life, just a couple of days around Christmas time. It is a Christmas movie covering the psychological trauma she went to in just a capsule. You know, the sort of things that she had to deal with, from not having any freedom, not having enough agency, dealing with, there should be trigger warnings, I think, for this movie and for what we're about to talk about, but there's a lot here about eating disorders. And there's a lot here about what she did to her body in order to sort of live up to not just the pressures of the royal family, which she always felt disconnected from and always uncomfortable around. And the film even uses like the house to be this constantly uncomfortable place. It's like The Shining sometimes. And, you know, they even have like the air quality, like it's cold and uninviting. It's super on the nose.
Well, I was thinking that too, because I was like, I know I just went through like a month of horror movies, but it feels like this is like kind of like horror adjacent at times in a way that I didn't anticipate but really liked. Like it feels like, you know, like the house is literally like suffocating her at times. Like it's, you know, even though it's like this huge expansive house, it feels like constricting at so many different points. And like how, you know, she can't like, she physically cannot leave. Like she keeps trying to like walk away, and these people keep pulling her back in a way that, you know, is a little literal, but in a way that I found pretty affecting and engaging.
Yeah. It's haunting, and it has a horror score by Johnny Greenwood, the best score of the year in my opinion. I
one of the best for sure. Yeah,
I easily my favorite, and I think that it's gotta get nominated. I could definitely see it winning.
Well, yeah, it's a big year for Johnny Greenwood. He has this. He has Power of the Dog, I think he did the score for, and then he also did Licorice Pizza. So he'll probably get nominated and win for at least one of those, I think.
I think so. I think this is his year. I think that Phantom Thread was an unbelievably good score, and I still listen to it. It's that good. And, speaking of Licorice Pizza. But yeah, so with Spencer, I refer to this in my review as it's like a ghost story where the ghost is still technically alive, right? Where a lot of things happen, but it feels like a ghost is going through it. And it's such a fascinating way to tackle this subject matter. There are scenes where you can't take them literally, and you have to sort of wonder, is she doing this in real life? Probably not. There's a scene where she is eating something, for example. It's okay, that's clearly not the case. And there are even moments when these things are played for laughs. I got a huge laugh out of this movie involving, I won't give it away, but it involves the score, and it involves the revelation of where music is coming from, that even though I was terrified by what was going on, I was unbelievably I felt all of this amusement and laughter from it. It was kind of disconcerting almost. But also this movie is very light, and there are moments here, I think one of the best scenes in the film, where it's just Diana with her kids, and they're just, it's a breath of relief and fresh, there's warmth all of a sudden, the color palette changes, and she's just hanging out with her kids and goofing around with them late at night. And it's one of the best, it's probably my favorite scene out of the whole movie. There's a lot to talk about here, and I want to be careful about what we say, but I want to turn it over to you. I also want to say Kristen Stewart, I think she's really good in this role. And if she wins Best Actress, I think that's, I think it's well-deserved, because she puts on a heck of a performance. I've seen some criticism toward her performance, and maybe we'll get into that, but I think it's spot on.
Yeah, maybe I missed this, but I was kind of surprised leading up to it that there wasn't more controversy about an American playing such a, iconic British person.
Yeah. And she does a great job, though, with it's not a Princess Diana impression. She's not doing a Princess Diana voice. She's just doing a British accent. She's doing her own thing with it, which is also very fascinating.
But I mean, I would hope that's a credit to Kristen Stewart, that people are just oh, well, Kristen Stewart's doing it. Well, yeah, she was great in Personal Shopper. Why not let her play Princess Diana? But, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it was just because last year there was so much going on. People didn't speculate on that. But I just feel if an American got cast as James Bond, all hell would break loose in the UK. It would just be it would just be pandemonium over there. But an American plays Princess Diana, I don't hear a peep about it. So, and I don't think there should be, but I just find it amusing that there wasn't.
I'm always happy to see that though, just because look, we have British actors play Americans all of the time. It's such a double standard, and we don't care. We're just hey, yeah, come on in. Water's fine. Benedict Cumberbatch.
I think more it's usually just oh, he was British.
Oh,
though
cool.
I feel though with, I don't know. I mean, I still need to see Power of the Dog, but I kind of feel anytime Benedict Cumberbatch plays an American, it's always very apparent to me, because it's just always just
with Doctor Strange.
Howdy, y'all. My name is Benedict Cumberbatch.
Oh yeah, in Mask, Black Mask. That was it.
Well, I was thinking of what was the Guantanamo Bay movie that came out this year with Jodie Foster. I saw that one. Okay, well, he's just I'm your Southern good boy, and I'm just, a regular old American, in a way that, I mean, I like the movie fine, but I thought that was kind of funny. But that's neither here nor there. That has nothing to do with Princess Anne or Spencer. But yeah, no, I was quite taken by her performance. One thing I really, really enjoyed about the film is that I think it channels something about Kristen Stewart that I find really fascinating, and something that I think a lot of filmmakers have used well, which is that even though she's obviously a beautiful, talented actress, she always feels deeply uncomfortable in her skin, and feels she's almost kind of crawling out of her body in every role that she's in, even some of the Western films. And I think that's part of the key to why I think she's such a endearing screen presence. There's something about her where it just kind of feels she's just uncomfortable with not only her fame, but just the idea of being alive. And I think that's a really inspired idea for casting her as Princess Diana. This woman who is, always in every single moment, even these personal times in her life, she's expected to be this kind of prim and proper person, always expected to be the elegant person, always expected to be Princess Diana, always expected to be, on in this way that like even like in her personal life when she's just like with her kids and stuff, she has to kind of embody this certain image. And like even, you know, like when she tries to have a moment by herself, there's always someone around like being like, oh, you have to be like, this thing, you have to be here, you have to put this dress on and stuff. And I think that makes Kristen Stewart's casting really inspired, and I think she fits into the role really well for that reason, because she's able to kind of play into that inherent uncomfortableness with being a celebrity, with being this person kind of fitting this image at all times. But also I just think she's able to kind of acknowledge the sort of like the facade of really like being in the royal family, but in a way that feels genuine, and which is a really, really tricky balance that I'm really impressed with how she's able to pull off in a way that, I think it's just really a great credit to her as an actress and as a screen presence, that she's able to kind of find this really tight balance between being this kind of idyllic image of Princess Diana, but finding this, somewhat falsified image of like, you know, like who she was behind closed doors, which is obviously, you know, a personification, because we won't fully know unless, you know, maybe something comes out from the royal family, which it probably never will. But I think, you know, just that's all a roundabout way of just saying that it's a really tricky performance to pull off. And I think she deserves a lot of credit for it, because she does a great job.
It's also a tricky movie to pull off because, like you said, by tackling who Princess Diana was behind closed doors, you do run into the danger zone of your film feeling exploitative of this human being. And I think it could have very easily fallen into that trap. Some people still think it did, you know, in their opinions. But I certainly don't. I think that what's fascinating to me about this movie is the fact that Princess Diana was a fairy tale that turned into a tragedy. You know, it was this fairy tale romance that turned into all of this scandal because of her alleged affair and Prince Charles' affairs. And then it ended in tragedy. It ended, you know, her life was cut short. And this movie is sort of unpacking through a character study, a really great character study, what was really like, what can be at the heart of a person going through something like this. Like, one of the things that I think is brilliant about what Stephen Knight, the screenwriter, kind of lays out here in terms of like the screenplay is she barely interacts with the royal family, like almost never. Like she has, I think, maybe one scene with the Queen, and it's very memorable.
Directly. I mean, one direct scene with the Queen, yeah.
It's like one-on-one. She has like one-on-one scene with Prince Charles, but most of the time she's interacting with the help. She's interacting a lot with Sean Harris, the cook, who his introduction in the film is brilliant in terms of like, this movie is like a gourmet food, you know. There's a lot of food porn in this, including
I won't give away, but there's a chain at the end of the film that great
chef's kiss.
Great stuff. Because I was talking with my friend who I went to a movie with. We were just kind of like, he was telling me, hey, did you know that Princess Diana was a big fan of this brand? And I was like, oh, I had no idea how that happened. It's just like, I don't know, but they're like making sweaters for her and all this stuff to lead up to the film. I was like, oh, that's kind of an odd choice. Wouldn't it be funny if that brand was in the movie and then the end of the film happened and it's like the Super Bowl happened for us because the theater was mostly absent. So it's just like, it happened. It's
that's
here.
Funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like I was saying, I mean, she mainly interacts with the people who I think, as the film posits, that she can trust. Like she feels like she can connect with because, you know, they're not nobility like her, but they are, you know, they're not royals. And so she interacts with Sean Harris. She interacts a lot with Sally Hawkins' character, who plays her royal dresser. And she sees her as a friend, but then she does start to get the feeling. She starts to get the anxiety of like, who can I trust? Who's saying things about me? Who, you know, all of the gossip is getting to her. And it's a movie about anxiety and depression, and, you know, how we can feel like relationships, like people are turning us against one another. And
the walls are always like echoing with whatever she says.
Exactly.
Even if it's, it's
everyone
really
hears
effective.
Everything. It's very blunt about all that messaging. And Timothy Spall, also is kind of one of those characters who's, you know, always given her gruff about every little thing, right? And he's the major,
perfectly cast. Yes, Timothy Spall,
100%.
Great grump, just a great grump.
But yeah, no, I honestly think that this movie gets a lot of things right. I've seen the main criticisms I've seen that I do think are kind of valid, but they don't ruin my enthusiasm for the film. I'm pretty high on it, but some of the criticisms I have seen have been like, okay, there are one too many or several too many times when they explain the metaphor, which I do get. Like there are a few times when I think it can be interpreted as Pablo Larraín thinks we're dumb. And he's like, okay, so you have to say that like she sees herself as the pheasant. We can't just have that sitting in the air. I have my own reaction to that sort of like blunt metaphor commentary, but I'll let you say something for sure.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't know if that's fully Pablo Larraín or if that's Stephen Knight, who I don't know if we mentioned wrote the screenplay. And I know,
hot off Serenity.
Well, I mean, hot off of, what was that awful movie that came out this year? Lockdown.
Oh yeah, he did do Lockdown. I forgot about that.
Yeah, because I was thinking it's funny that he did one of the best films of the year and arguably the worst.
Yeah, there you go. And then one of the worst of last year's too. And then I mean, he hasn't made a lot of good films in general. I mean, I guess Locke
Serenity
probably
2019 or was that 2020?
2019, but we were seeing it early 2020. But he did Girl in the Spider's Web, which wasn't very good.
Okay, I never saw that one.
I didn't really like Allied very much. I mean, I thought Burnt was okay. But and Pawn Sacrifice I like Pawn Sacrifice, but Locke I think is probably his big movie.
Yeah, Locke.
Like, yeah, that's good.
Well, that's why I was excited because it's just like he's really good about writing like a contained like chamber piece like that,
and he directed it too.
Right? Yes, exactly. Yeah, so I was excited for that reason, and I think a lot of the stuff in the script, I don't think it's a bad script per se, but it does rely a lot on text over subtext in a way that like dialogue can be very literal. A lot of the visual metaphors are kind of on the nose to a comical degree, I think, at times.
Yeah.
Including this whole thing with Anna Boleyn, in a way that was
you
just
don't
like,
have to say it.
I mean, I got it the first 10 times. Like, you can kind of calm down. I just feel like that's where I feel like, okay, like, put a little trust in your audience. Like, we can figure this out after 3 or 4 times, you know? Like, I think I wasn't bothered so much about, like, the, like, pheasant stuff and things like that. Like, I think that was done a little bit more tastefully. But, yeah, just, I think for me, that's what holds this back from being, like, a great film is just that there's just so many times where it feels like the movie doesn't trust itself or it doesn't trust its audience to be willing to be a little bit more subdued, a little bit less obvious and on the nose with what it's trying to say about Princess Diana and stuff like that. And I think if it maybe respect itself or its audience a little bit more, it could have found that balance and been even more profound in what it's communicating. But as it is, it feels like it's kind of robbing itself at different points, especially in the second half.
I get that. I have my own sort of like pet theory for what Knight and Larraín are trying to get across. And look, this doesn't disqualify, I think, the criticism. I think it can still very much be like, okay, you know, please don't do this. But I think what he's trying to get at is, I think they're doing it on purpose. I think they know that it's really like, over explanation-y. Like, you don't need to say that, people are smart enough. But I think they're just trying to be like, okay, but everything in her life was so subtle, and so like everything is spoken and, you know, has double meaning. So I think they were trying to like present it as like, what if like the metaphor was just said out loud? Like, just say it, because it's less that the impact of knowing that she's the pheasant, and it's more of like her recognizing it and coming to terms with it. I think that's what they're going for. I don't think it works for every instance. Like, I think there are a couple others. Like, I think the Anne Boleyn thing is the biggest issue, but I think there is this sort of like intentional effort to let it be clear to the audience, not that they need to know that it's a thing, but that she knows it. Right. And I still get like the criticisms can still stand for people because you're like, well, you trust that she knows that. I don't know. I think that because the movie is so abstract in other ways, they're just trying to like not lose sight of how smart and, you know, that this is the metaphor that she is like grabbing onto for herself. And there is something unique about that I kind of appreciate about the movie.
Yeah. I mean, I get that. I guess for me, I find myself more frustrated by it because all the other tones that they're striving for, I think, throughout the film are done really effectively. Like, even like you said, even though it is speculative and kind of verges on like tabloidy kind of ideas about Princess Diana, I think it is able to be fairly tasteful in its presentation, be a very lovely, well-made film, and also like kind of have like these like Cassavetes-esque like woman under the influence sort of touches as well that kind of give the movie a jagged edge that somehow doesn't interfere with, like I said, the kind of more polished pristine qualities of the film that I think that stuff. It's so well done and so well balanced throughout the film that when it does kind of do like a clunky visual metaphor like that, it just becomes more jarring to me because it's just like, well, you're doing so much of this stuff so well already. Why not just give yourself a little bit more faith to just kind of let that be a little bit more artfully done, I guess.
I agree.
It
It could have been balanced better.
Sure. Yeah. So that's my takeaway from that, at least.
Sure. There was the cinematography. Sorry, I couldn't resist. No, the cinematography was quite quite top.
John's watching The Sopranos right now. If listeners don't know.
Yeah, I want to start doing that more often. In terms of, there was a cinematography, but no. So the cinematography here, Claire Mathin, big year for her. I mean, she's coming off of Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which the cinematography in that was unbelievably good, and then this year she has not just this movie, but also Petite Maman, which gorgeous, stunning movie, where that movie had also a lot of exteriors, a lot of woods, a lot of, I
might see it Sunday.
I hope you do.
I'm going to try to.
It's such a quick, lovely movie. And with Spencer, this movie has a really big range. I mean, we kind of have mentioned how suffocated she is inside of the like Christmas house, but there are also a lot of like road shots here. There are a lot of like her wandering the wilderness. There's a shot of a scarecrow in this that is just like, it really sticks in your brain. I mean, everything is just shot in such a striking, lasting way, I think, in a way that's really punching above what I think Jackie was doing. I just think that Larraín really found a kindred, like somebody who can really like bring his vision forth in a way that's really great. So big credit to Claire Mathin for the cinematography here.
And I mean, I don't know if it needs to be said, but I think it deserves to be said. The costumes in this movie are fantastic.
Yes.
I mean, I think it's kind of a given it's a Princess Diana film, but
because the costumes are part of the story.
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, they're a big part of the story.
They're a big part of the story. They're a big part of Diana herself. Yeah.
I mean, at the very least, if Kristen Stewart doesn't win Best Actress, I'd be shocked this movie didn't walk away with a Best Costume nomination at very least.
Dune is the one. I think Dune is going to be the
for costumes,
the juggernaut for costumes and for the technicals, because the costumes in Dune are pretty. I mean, I could see the Academy being like, but you're an adaptation. You had something to really build off of. But they could say the same thing about this, where it's like, okay, but you have, although they do have original outfits in here that are striking against the real life, which is, I mean, that's so impressive.
I just feel like the costumes are such a big part of the story here that would help it win over Dune, where it's like, I feel like
I could see that. Yeah.
Dune is more about like the sound design, the maybe cinematography, maybe the score and stuff like that. I feel like that's going to be like what the Academy takes away from Dune in terms of award season.
Sure. And it might be the case where they're like, okay, I'm going to vote Dune on like all these other things like cinematography and production design, but then with, I want to give Spencer something, you know what I mean? Like I could see that. That said, they might be like, but I'm giving Spencer Best Actress. I mean, you know how the Academy is. They can't be controlled.
And I mean, like, obviously, I think like Cruella and stuff's going to get nominated, and like maybe House of Gucci and stuff like that. So like there'll be competition, but I mean, we'll see.
We will see. That's all I got for Spencer. I really liked this film a lot. It's not one of my absolute favorites of the year, but of the award season bunch, it's one of the ones that really hit me the hardest. And I think that it's so fascinating. We mentioned this is an American actress in the role. This is a Chilean director, and they're doing something that is really is transporting you to this like moment in time in the British royal family that I think is, even though I don't think this is going to top all the best of the year lists across the board or anything. I think it is one of those movies that a lot of people, a lot of critics and essayists are going to look back on at being like, man, that was a really good, like, understated sort of like breakdown of a person's psychology in such a unique way. Like when people are talking about, I don't like this biopic because X, Y, and Z, here's a movie that really did in a more interesting way. I think that it's going to be a great reference point for years to come.
Yeah, and I think it's also just a weirdly kind of timely film too, because I think it's worth noting that I presume they wrote this last year. They filmed it this year in January, so it is, I think, it's kind of hard to ignore like the COVID-ness of it. Like it is, like a film in one confined space. This kind of like literal idea of like being suffocated in one location, stuff like that makes it weirdly kind of relevant to the pandemic in ways I don't feel like I want to dive too much into, but it does feel like a part of the text in a way that I think will make it quite a film for the now. I don't know if you feel similarly or want to even comment on that at all, but it's something I thought about.
Totally. Yeah. I consider it, like almost like a post-pandemic movie in a sense. So like, I don't think that it's commenting directly on like lockdowns or anything like that, because it's not locked down.
No, I don't think it is. I mean, Stephen Knight made his lockdown movie before this, and it was awful. But
there is a general stifling of like the world just feels so tragic and so uncertain that I think is more of a post-pandemic thing. It's like we're coming out of it and like things have only gotten worse. And I think there's that sort of vibe to this movie that kind of echoes. Just
as like kind of general sense of foreboding, just kind of like this idea of just like you can't really like you have no sense of control, even though everything feels like timed out and like everything feels like so scheduled and manipulative, but there's like this like suffocating sense that you can't like escape at any point in a way that I find really affecting and, like I said, really timely right now. And just I think it's a really, really well done film for many reasons.
I agree. Spencer is now playing in theaters. It came out in the US and the UK this past weekend, and if you can check it out in the theater, definitely give it a watch if you can do so safely. I saw it at home, but I definitely got plenty out of it in that format as well.
Yeah, I saw it in theaters, and I would definitely recommend seeing it that way.
We'll see how the box office does. It's a $16 million budget, and it had a bit of a slow start. So I don't know if this one's going to, but I think it's going to have awards legs, it's going to have an initial release. And I think that it'll get some I think that it has a shot at Best Picture. I think you think that I'm wrong about that.
No, I think it
has
has
a lot
shot.
of competition.
Yeah, I think it will. I mean, I just don't know how well it's going to do. Right. I mean, I think it seems like a lock for Best Actress. Like I said, it seems like a lock for Best Costumes. Maybe like supporting actress for Sally Hawkins, and maybe
I think that's. I mean, Timothy Spall. There's a little bit of action there, but I think Belfast is real. There are so many other movies that are kicking up. In terms of supporting actress, supporting actress. I think Best Picture is a question mark. I think, but and director score, as well.
Editing, I think, are two pretty likely ones. But we'll see. Yeah.
We'll see. And I hope that I think that it is the kind of movie that might get like a late, an early 2022 re-release that could pick it up a little bit even further. And I think Neon will want to do that because it's definitely one of their big contenders this year. So that is Spencer. All right. Rotten Tomatoes for Spencer. Well, actually, 209 reviews have been encountered for Spencer. It's quite a lot for the movie. I think because it was at Venice, and it did a bunch of festival stuff, and I think critics were like, "Yeah, I got to see it."
Well,
so, what do you think the score is?
Is it doing well in the UK? I didn't ask that.
I don't
earlier. Know. I don't know. I imagine it will do well if it is, but maybe not. I don't know. Who knows?
It's not doing well in general, so I don't think.
Yeah, maybe not.
It only made like $2 million over the weekend.
Right. Yeah, I know it didn't do well at our theater. We're playing at the Harris Theater right now. It's not doing fantastic. Not awful, but not great. But I would say the Rotten Tomatoes score is an 87%.
85. It was higher. Yeah, it's been dropping, like trickle dropping quite a bit. What about audience score? Audience score has 250 plus verified ratings. Where do you think it's at with audiences?
My heart says 74%.
Your heart is about to be broken. 50%.
Right. 50%.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
people took one look at Spencer and they were just like down with the monarchy. Like, no, thank you. I actually don't know what the cinema score is. I don't think it's been released.
Yeah. I don't know.
They're too scared.
I know they didn't know what to make of it. The jury's still out with them. I know the audience that were coming out of Spencer at our theater seemed a bit kind of like puzzled with the film. Like they weren't really sure what to make of it in a way that I could see audiences being kind of dismissive, just like, oh, well, I wanted like a movie about her, like her life, not like, like her, mental health or whatever in a way that I feel like would make it, I think, more respectful later down the line. But I think at the moment I could see the initial reaction being fairly dismissive, but who knows? I don't know for sure.
I don't know either, but all right. No cinema score, so I guess we'll see. We'll see if people fall back in love with Spencer. Who knows? Let's move on to our last film of the week, or at least for this episode. Let's talk about The Beta Test. The Beta Test is a dark comedy thriller, very unique film. It was written and directed, and it stars Jim Cummings, as well as PJ McCobb. He co-wrote and co-directed the film, and he also co-stars in the film. He's not like one of the main characters, but he shows quite a bit. The movie is this sort of high concept, sort of, I don't even know. It's about relationships. It's about adultery. It's about a guy, a Hollywood agent, who gets a mysterious letter in the mail saying that he can attend this anonymous, no strings attached sexual encounter. And he decides, well, if I do this, what will happen? And so as certain events unfold, his entire world sort of just falls apart.
Yeah. Mike Lib, one sentence description would be Eyes Wide Shut meets Swimming with Sharks.
I would say meets Office Space.
Yeah.
Personally.
I mean, have you seen Swimming with Sharks? Because that's more like Hollywood agent type thing, I think.
Yeah, point taken. It's a short movie, first of all, and it kind of just gets to the point. Like, I was kind of surprised at the structure of this thing. Like, it starts with like a cold open. It runs you right into this world right off the bat. And I would say this is one of the most fascinating movies where the main character you hate. He's sort of this like, oh gosh, Norman Bates, but like more of like the American Psycho version. And he's like the most stereotypical Hollywood agent. This character should be infuriating. This character should be so annoying and so like, I don't care. But Jim Cummings, we mentioned he's the main guy. He also is the director and the writer. This movie is a bit of a magic trick because I was so fascinated by every boneheaded, dumb thing, evil thing he was doing. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Under the Silver Lake, where you despise that guy, but you're still like invested. You want to know what's going to happen. It's so odd. Also, really want to point out Virginia Newcomb, who we saw from The Death of Dick Long, is in this. I thought that she was kind of the secret weapon of the movie. Right? Like, she comes in and there are some like maybe some preconceptions that I had with her character that the movie totally spins, because I think Cummings understands what you're supposed to feel. Like, he's intentionally inserting and removing things from this movie to guide you a certain way, but then to surprise you. I came out of this movie really digging it. I think Beta Test is a neat, tight, fun little thriller. If I can say that, with some interesting ideas. I don't think it totally nails the landing. I think it could have had a much stronger ending, but what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely intrigued to see it. I know we didn't talk about Thunder Road when it came out, but I really, really enjoyed that film. I've grown to like it even more thinking back on it. And I think it was a really good showcase for Jim Cummings, not only as a filmmaker, but as an actor. I think he just has such a idiosyncratic screen presence in a way that I think he seems really aware of and in tune with, as far as like playing these sort of broadly macro aggressive male figures in a way that obviously, like the key phrase would be like toxic masculinity or whatever. But like clearly like he plays the type of guys who like they got some shit to work through. Like they've got these like issues that they're dealing with, either because of like public perception or like their own inherent like need to do something, or this idea that like they as like straight white men are like kind of promised these certain things and they just can't get them. And I thought he communicated on that stuff really well in Thunder Road. And ultimately I'm favorable on Wolf of Snow Hollow, but I found myself a bit disappointed by it. I think you were more favorable than I was. Did you see that one? Or what?
No, we were talking last week. That was the one that I skipped. I think you talked about that with Abby.
That's right. Yeah, 'cause I remember we covered it on the show, but I didn't remember if you had seen it. I remember I appreciate what it was going for, especially in terms of like using the wolf metaphor for like kind of tale of like addiction and like him playing another cop character in a way that, you know, I could see it being narratively a piece with Thunder Road, but I just found it to be not quite as affecting. But I think this movie, I was really curious about his third film because I was just like, okay, I think he needs to move away from playing cops. Like, he's done this 3 times now with his first 2 films and then with Halloween Kills. Like, I want to see him do something different, kind of tackling his themes, his pet ideas, but in a way that willingly kind of skews other genres, other types of characters, other lines of business. And clearly, like, Hollywood is festering with these sort of like, you know, pompous, self-satisfied kind of guys who just want to like put on this persona of like they got everything together, they're on top of everything, but like, you know, they have these kind of very fragile egos, this you know, flailing industry that is so unpredictable and so wildly changing at any given moment in time, especially now. And I think he makes a pretty effective thriller / satire / horror film. I guess it's technically a horror film overall. It has horror elements to it, certainly.
I don't know if I agree with that. It's not even that suspenseful, really.
I would disagree with you on that one. I thought it was pretty tense. Not like...
It's tense, but it's tense in like a frantic, I don't know.
Right.
Like, again, I think that it's like a textbook thriller satire in that sense.
Yeah, I'm just going... IMDb credits it as a horror comedy.
Oh, well, if IMDb
Sure, I'm just telling you. Yeah, I mean, you know, they credit it as a horror comedy thriller. So that's the 3 genres.
You know what? They can do what they want.
The beginning of the film is certainly at least horror adjacent. And then there's like a few other scenes that borrow from the horror. And obviously his first film was a horror or his second film, I mean, was a horror film. So yeah, I mean, I liked it. I don't know if I loved it, but I definitely admire what Jim Cummings is doing as a filmmaker. And I think he's really in tune with what he wants to say and what he wants to communicate. And I don't know if I have liked the film of his as much as I've liked Thunder Road, but I think this is certainly a step up from The Wolf of Snow Hollow.
It's funny. I think this is one of those episodes where all the movies, I think we're pretty much on the same page. Yeah, I'm in like it, not love it mode as well. I think it's dark, quirky, and it's what I like about it is that it's clearly about the toxicity of like men in positions of power. Like there's even a part it's like, I miss the early 2000s, you know, there's a lot of like Harvey Weinstein commentary. Yeah. Right, there's a lot of like, you can't do this sort of thing anymore, but it's commenting on it without feeling like it's above the criticism. You know, you almost get the sense that Jim Cummings is kind of talking to himself in this movie, like a little bit. And I think it's just being honest about what men are feeling about masculine culture and how they're feeling a little bit like, man, what are we supposed to do? And I think there's so much good content in that regard of like, in this movie, it's not like there's some sort of like bastion of here's how you're supposed to be. It's a little bit bleaker than that, which I appreciate, because I think we've talked about this in plenty of reviews where sometimes I think like Hollywood's response to skirting the sort of problematic dude archetype is that they make this lion out of the nice guy kind of character. He can do no wrong. We saw it like very recently with Last Night in Soho, where that character, he's perfect. And it's kind of like reverse gendering, I think, what we had to deal with for the longest time with female supporting characters and manic pixie dream girls to some extent, where it's like this like endlessly doting, always like perfectly supportive character instead of a one-dimensional human being. So it's funny because this movie, it's about that, but it also like wraps it up in this very engaging story and thriller about a guy who becomes repeatedly obsessed with this like sort of scam that he perceives as going on, where people are being like lured into this situation with these purple envelopes, and he's trying to unpack it. And I like how the movie too, like as it goes, it starts to sort of like loosen the bolts on how like bizarre and mysterious this whole like revelation of what's going on is supposed to be. At some point you get the feeling, oh, it's not actually like this big unbelievable thing, and that's kind of the point. What he's projecting onto it is sort of the point. And so I won't say anything else because I think it's worth discovering for yourself, but I really got a lot out of it in that respect.
See, I kind of like to merge the two, where it's like there is actually something deeper and more sinister happening, but it's also kind of like in his head at the same time.
That's what I mean.
It's
I
kind of
guess
like a mix of both. Right?
It is there. It's not like a small thing that's going on, but I do think that like at times you think like it's going for something like, oh, I don't know. I don't want to say because I would give too much away, but yeah.
Well, I mean, without getting into like the end of film, there are clear scenes where like other characters are put in harm's way and in danger because of something associated with this like kind of a looming presence. So it's like, it's not a secret that like there is actual stuff going down. It's just a matter of like how much of it's actually going down and how much of it's related to his paranoia and all this stuff. And like how much is he being influenced by these things and how much is he actually just like too into his head to really like see the big picture here in a way that, I don't know, it almost feels like weirdly almost like Inherent Vice-esque without like the drugs. Like kind of like there is like stuff going on, but also it's just kind of like this weirdo going around trying to act more macho than he really is and just kind of caught in this like huge conspiracy thing that he can never fully understand or even try to really understand properly outside of his own kind of selfish interest in it. And I think it's done and obviously in a very broadly satirical way, but in ways I often found pretty funny and gripping, even when the central character is just a huge douche.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of uncut gems in there too, in terms of the franticness of it. It's got a little bit of the number 23 with Jim Carrey, where it's just, it spirals and spirals out of something that's not actually that we're spiraling to some respect. I totally forgot what you were saying about the reason I wasn't thinking about a horror is I actually forgot about the, like some of this, it happens early, but like some of the killing that happens in this, like the danger of it. And I think it's because that was the least interesting thing about the movie to me. So I wasn't even thinking about that when we were like, oh, is this a horror? I guess it is, because it does have that stuff. I forgot.
Right. Yeah, that's why I was kind of confused when you were being hand-wavy about
this isn't a horror and someone's like being stabbed. Like,
yeah, you're just like, am I being gaslit right now?
I'm so sorry, Passion.
No, but yeah, I mean, I think it's like, I mean, I used horror kind of loosely with Spencer, and I don't think that's actually a horror film. I just think it has like horror type scenes. This is like somewhat of a horror film, but mostly a satire / thriller / mystery or whatever. That just happens to have like kind of like a horror movie bubbling underneath it at the same time. But yeah, I mean, like I wish I loved it because I think I really like what Jim Cummings is going for, like I said, as a filmmaker and actor. And I think he's doing some really interesting things. And I think what he's able to do on these really low budgets is really commendable. Like I think his films look really sharp for like being only like a few $1,000s. Yeah. I think he's smart and economical as a filmmaker as far as like using space and time like that. And also I like that his filmmaking seems like very controlled and thoughtful, but he plays these characters who are clearly like unhinged and like willing to freak out at any moment. And it's like this kind of like nice yin and yang that I think his style is really smart about communicating. And he just seems to be really kind of honing his style in interesting ways. And like I said, it seems like he's moving more to genre territory with his later films in ways I find really intriguing. And I want to keep following his filmography for that reason and more.
Yeah, this thing is a micro budget, like $250,000. So it's really impressive because you don't watch this movie and be like, I would assume it's like a couple million, you know? And the fact that it's like a fraction of that is it's seriously impressive what he's able to accomplish with so little. And I think part of that too is that he doesn't have any big name actors. He has people you might recognize, you know, like you might recognize PJ McCabe and you might recognize Regina Newcomb, but he does almost this whole movie with people, you know, where he's probably the biggest, most recognizable face, and he himself isn't that recognizable. People would be like, Winnie the Pooh? Like, what are you talking about? So I don't know. But yeah, this is from IFC Films. It sounds like we both dig it a good bit. Yeah, not one of my favorites, but certainly something that I premiered at Berlin, and it got a little bit of buzz there. It's now available in VOD. I don't think it's in a lot of theaters. It's only made like $25,000 at the box office, so I think it's at like a handful of theaters right now, probably New York and LA if I would have had to guess. But yeah, I think it's if you're in the mood for a cool little indie that you can stream or rent on demand, definitely give this one a look. It's worth your time. Any last thoughts though on beta test before we play our game?
Well, I'm guessing there's no like cinema score or anything for this, right? We're just going off of. Yeah, I was gonna say
Vegas. I don't think has gotten it yet. They still have Spencer to deal with to chew off.
Sure, they're still contemplating how they feel about Spencer.
They're still in the theater,
right? It's like, I think I like that. Yeah. Beta tests would be even more confounding, I think, to them.
Probably.
No, I mean, I don't think I have anything else to talk about with beta tests. I mean, there's a lot I want to dive into, but I feel like a lot of it would be spoilery. So
Yeah,
I don't want to so I think it's worth watching. It's definitely, if you're intrigued by it and if you like Thunder Road, it's worth watching for sure. And I'm really excited to see where Jim Cummings goes next. But yeah, not like a great film, but definitely one that keeps me very interested to see where this filmmaker and actor is going to go next.
Agreed. All right, what do you think the Rotten Tomatoes score is? We have 67 reviews counted. Not bad. So a lot of those were Berlin, but we've gotten some more as the weekend came. I'm actually impressed with how many it got, considering how many other films are happening right now. And
yeah,
I guess people were like us. It's like we want to capture at least one thing. Get to one thing that's not like the big movie. So There you go.
Yeah. I do think Jim Cummings has earned a lot of clout, deservedly so, I think, in critic circles and all that.
Cummings.
Yeah. I'm going to say 68% for the critic score.
68? Really?
Yeah.
68?
Is that too high or too low?
It's 94.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it was 100.
I thought it'd just be
coming out. I thought it'd
be kind of divisive. I don't know. I was way off on that one.
Wow, I thought you liked the film. I was kidding.
No, I thought it'd just be more divisive.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay. What about audience score? Audience score, we can't really like take much with because it has fewer than 50 ratings. None of that, like, it doesn't have verified ratings, but I don't imagine there's like a campaign against this movie. So
this is a real shot in the dark.
Yeah.
I'm going to just say 74% again.
55.
55. All right.
People saw this after Spencer and they were in such a bad mood. They were like, you know what? I don't like this either. I don't like anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, of all the films we talked about this week, I'd say Beta Test is it's like right in the middle. I would say, like, I think Spencer is like the big recommend for me in terms of the ones we just talked about. And yeah, Beta Test is a good follow if you want to check that out as well. Eternals, I mean, people know if they're going to see that. I mean, what could we possibly say about Eternals? That would,
we said like an hour's worth, I think. I
guess
think we
so.
said our piece. Yeah.
That's it for our show this week. Thanks for listening, as always. Next week, we are planning to talk about Belfast. We were hoping to do a bonus episode of Belfast, but we got a lot going on. I'm going to be out of town, all kinds of stuff going on. So we're not going to get to Belfast soon, or as soon as we had expected. But we'll talk about that film. We're probably going to talk about the new Home Alone movie, too. And we really want to talk about Clifford the Big Red Dog.
Do we really want to talk about it?
I want to do a drunk episode.
You know what? If you're excited, I'm excited. How about that?
I just want to see what this dog is made of.
Why is he so big?
Yeah, I've always wondered. I read the books and they never never really explained it in a satisfying way.
So have you seen the trailer for Clifford? I'm guessing not.
No.
You don't see a lot of trailers. I've seen it a couple times. Clifford's not big enough in my opinion. Maybe I'll change my mind when I see the film. This trailer, I think he's too small. They make him like 12 feet. He has to be like 18 feet or something. He just seems so small in the movie.
This is ridiculous, Will Ashton, because it's Clifford. He needs to be.
He's a big red dog.
The bigger he is, the bigger the box office. Don't they get that?
Right. Well, I mean, they gotta say something for the sequel. Like he has to get bigger. His ego has to get bigger, and so yeah.
I hear. You know what? That's a good point. Also, stay tuned for our Heart of They Fall bonus episode. Hopefully, that'll be out this week as well. But until then, we will see you all on the next one from the Internet California. I'm John Negroni.
And for the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Washington.
See you next time.